In the last couple of videos, we've seen how we can apply effects on the audio track, such as modulating the volume of the audio track using the envelope tool or muting very specific parts of the track. All these processes and everything we've done so far, we've just assumed that the audio tracks were not going to change, in the sense that the audio tracks were the original ones, starting from 0 seconds to, in this case, 5:45, and there was no cutting of any sections of that track. But it is something that might have to happen, so let's have a look at how we can do it. So we've already looked at the time shift tool, where we can use that tool to move the tracks around, but there's a lot more that we can do within Audacity. For example, these two audio tracks are the same ones, the guest channel and the host channel from the interview, and as we've seen previously, these two need to remain in sync all the time. So if I move one out of time, then the rest of the interview is completely out of sync, which is why we couldn't delete a section. So it's important to make sure that these remain in sync. So how we can do that? Well, if you start moving one close to the start of the other one, you will see that at some point there's going to be a yellow line that forms. This is a snap. So when that happens, Audacity is making sure through the snapping tool, it's making sure that the start of this track and the start of this track are exactly at the same starting time, which means that these can remain in sync. Okay, so you can easily snap them together. Now there are other ways in which you can make sure that tracks can be snapped like this. For example, if I select this one and I go track, align track, and let's say I align that to start at 0, it will they will both be at 0 because I have both selected now. So let's say I have one that's over here and one that's over here, and I want to align them together. So there's that one way of doing it, but let's say I had several ones that I wanted to align at the same starting point. I could just select all of them and then just go on track, and align together, and they would just snap together. And it's no different from bringing that here and then snapping it over here. But if you have, let's say, 10 different audio tracks, it might be easier to just select all of them and then just go into the track and align track. All right, so let's put these back right. Oops. Let's put these right back at the start. I'm just going to align to 0. Let's see how we can lock them together. So now that, let's say, they are aligned, and then we don't want one to move without the other, we can actually select these audio tracks and go track and sync lock tracks, which means that even if I have only one selected and I take one and I move one, both tracks are going to be moved at the same time. So it's almost like, in terms of moving the tracks along the timeline, it's almost like these two have been merged as one single track, but we can still apply other effects independently. But in terms of moving along the timeline, we cannot move one without the other. So we can disable that by going track and disable sync lock tracks. Okay. Now we can split a track. So let's say that in the middle of the interview, you want to have a break. It could be for any reason. It could be because you have, let's say, some advertising or some sponsorship, or you want to have just a break to give your listeners some time to process what you're saying. You can actually create a split in the middle. So how do you create a split in the middle? There's a function in the edit that's called clip boundaries. Okay, there's two different ways in which we can split the boundaries. So let's zoom out. And let's say I want to create a split at the 2:30 mark. Okay, I'm just going to take my cursor, just going to select both tracks. Okay, so this is creating that pale blue selection. It's creating a boundary, and everything that's contained within that boundary is going to be split out. So let me show you how that works. I can go into edit, clip boundaries, and I can just go on split. Okay, if I go on split and I use my time shift tool, you will see that this has been split in, each one of these tracks has been split into subparts. Okay, that's one way of doing it, and it doesn't have to be, when you're splitting something, it doesn't have to be just in two. So let me undo that split. You can also create a split that's right in the middle, and that would create 3 new sections. So edit, clip boundaries, and split. So now each track has 3 sections. So this is how you can split a track. There's another way of splitting a track, and that's by creating a new split. So even if I'm splitting the track over here, it is still contained within the same track. But what if I wanted to create a split and then be able to move that across so that there's an overlap? Then we need to push that onto a new track. And the way to do that is, I'm going to select the bit that I want to split, edit, clip boundaries, and split new. When I do a split new, it creates a new audio track. The split section is copied onto the new audio track, and it starts exactly where the original track ended. So that's a way to create a new audio track from an original audio track. There are more things that we can do. For example, if I select a section of my audio track and I want that section to repeat again, I can just go copy or Control C, like in most programs, and then I can just go Control V or paste, and that copies the section that I originally selected as a new audio track. However, it will automatically paste it starting from 0. But then you can move it around if you want, because it is a completely independent track. That works with cut as well, but just be a little bit more careful with cut, because if you are cutting a section, paste the section, where you have cut the section in 3, these 2 remaining sections have been brought back together and fused back together and merged back together into one single audio track. So that section that used to exist in the middle is now completely separate. So you won't be able to really put it back in here. So copy paste and cutting paste can be very useful, but just be a little bit careful on how you do it, because you might forget where that section initially came from. If you want to do some operations with that, it's always useful to have a backup, so that if something goes wrong, you can always go back to your original file. So this is pretty much it in terms of the navigation and how you want to split the different tracks and how you want to move them around, how you can overlap them by creating a new audio track. And even subsections of a new audio track can be treated exactly as the original audio track. So all the effects that you implemented on these can still be used. The adjustments, such as removing the background noise, all of that can still be used even if you have subparts of an audio track.